2/3 of the world does not have this, but desperately yearns for it. Of the 7.5 billion people in the world, everyone wants the freedom to worship or not to worship, according to his or her conscience. Even atheists want the freedom to be atheists. Yet some 5.3 billion people, more than 2/3 of the world's population, are living their lives under governments that severely restrict the practice of religion. Welcome back to Cool Seminary Tutorials. Hi, I'm Professor Wendy. Today I'm excited to address an important topic that is a much longed for but all too scarce, coveted treasure in our world. That is religious freedom. Because of its complexity, we'll break this subject into a 3-part series of videos. Part 1, Religious Freedom, a Coveted Treasure. Part 2, Foundations of Religious Freedom in the USA. And Part 3, The Ethic and Hope of Religious Freedom. Here in the U.S., because we do enjoy religious freedom, we can not only talk about it openly, we can also enjoy the personal and social benefits of this basic human right. Religious freedom may seem like a given to many Americans. You go to your church, temple, synagogue, or mosque if you have one, and I go to mine, or not, as we choose. So accustomed to this freedom are we that it's hard to imagine what society would be like without it. Have you ever wondered how different the USA and the lives of American citizens would be if we had some certain religion imposed upon us and enforced? Most of us don't even want our own religion enforced on us, let alone someone else's. Even if we do sometimes take it for granted, most citizens of the U.S. cherish our freedom of religion and those who have defended it at great cost. In stark contrast, out of all the people in the world, more than 2/3, some 5.3 billion people, lack the freedom to practice religion according to the dictates of their own conscience. For example, the U.S. International Religious Freedom Report for 2015 tells the true story of Farkhunda Malikzada, a 27-year-old woman who lived in Afghanistan. Farkhunda lived with her parents, worked as a teacher's assistant, and was a student of Islamic law. Like so many others, she dreamed of having her own family one day, and she hoped to become a judge. So she was studying Islamic law. But her dreams were cut short in March of 2015 when on her way home from work, Farkhunda stopped at a downtown shrine to say her prayers. While there, she got into an argument with the caretaker of the holy site. The dispute was about the selling of charms at the shrine, which Farkhunda considered, based on her studies, to be un-Islamic. In the course of the argument, the caretaker accused Farkhunda of treason. He falsely accused her of having committed blasphemy by burning a Quran. Farkhunda vehemently denied the accusations, but a crowd had already gathered to hear what the disturbance was about. According to the official report, the crowd quickly turned into a mob, bent on punishing the accused with death. Bystanders watched as the crowd tormented and killed its victim. The same report from just last year also chronicled the following. More than 62 persons in the previous 15 years killed by mob violence in Pakistan for allegedly desecrating the Quran or insulting the Prophet Muhammad. 27 Muslims in Sudan detained on charges of disturbing public order and apostasy. A Palestinian poet in Saudi Arabia imprisoned, sentenced to death for apostasy because he allegedly made disparaging remarks about Islam. Non-state groups such as Daesh and Boko Haram continued to rank amongst the most egregious abusers of religious freedom in the world, including killings, torture, enslavement and trafficking, rape, and other sexual abuse against religious and ethnic minorities and Sunnis in areas under their control, besides attacks on Christians and Muslims in areas not under their control, killing hundreds, especially in and around churches and mosques. In 2015, the U.S. Department of State reported increasing religious discrimination in 16 countries: Angola, Azerbaijan, Iran, Saudi Arabia, China, North Korea, Eritrea, Brunei, Burma, Vietnam, Central African Republic, Hungary, Bahrain, Ukraine, Russia, and the Slovak Republic. Citizens of the U.S. and other free countries may wonder just how, if at all, does a lack of religious freedom in other parts of the world impact us? The U.S. easily made the list of countries with the most amount of religious freedom. Have we not in the U.S. been safely ensconced for more than 2 centuries with religious freedom as a foundational principle? So many of us thought until September 11th, 2001. If you live in the U.S. and were old enough to know about it, that was a day you will never forget. In an instant, your entire worldview was changed. Suddenly, every U.S. American felt the vulnerability and shock of your nation having been violently attacked on its own soil, with almost 3,000 unsuspecting innocent lives ruthlessly extinguished in a matter of moments. Several weeks later, while himself safely hidden in a bunker on the other side of the world, the man who took responsibility for the unprecedented attack issued a video statement in which he attributed these shocking acts of violence to a global religious war in which the world was divided into two sides, Muslims and non-Muslims. He characterized his enemies, that is, non-Muslims, as infidels, and called for every Muslim to rush to make his religion victorious over every non-Muslim, going so far as to invoke the assistance of God against the non-Muslims of the world. Thus, the attacker proclaimed to the world that the USA was now engaged in a global religious war. How does a nation so long committed to religious freedom find itself implicated, if not engaged, in a religious war? Was this a war waged against non-Muslims, or against religious freedom, or against the USA, or all of the above? The 9/11 attacks and the attackers' religious rhetoric, along with the subsequent religiously associated acts of hostility and violence, both around the world and in this country, have placed the matter of religious freedom once again before us all. When a nation has been attacked, ostensibly for religious reasons, how, if at all, does this threaten the religious freedom of its citizens, including those citizens who may share some of the same religious perspectives as the attackers? In such a case, is religious freedom real, or is it just a myth? Some have even proposed outlawing or shunning certain religions as a matter of national security. Building on the anxiety that's been provoked by the religious rhetoric of these unspeakably violent attackers, conspiracy theories lately abound concerning the motives of immigrants from Islamic nations and how they should be treated, whether they should be trusted, or, as we heard in a recent presidential campaign, whether they should be allowed entry as immigrants in the first place. Fear and suspicion increasingly impact everyday relationships between Muslim and non-Muslim Americans. These questions are exacerbated by the realities of current immigration trends. 3 years ago, the Pew Research Center reported that the religious affiliation of U.S. immigrants, while still a majority Christian, is in fact becoming more diverse, including a rising percentage of persons of Islamic faith. According to the Pew report, in the 20 years between 1992 and 2012, the estimated share of new legal permanent residents who are Christian declined from 68% to 61%, while the estimated share of green card recipients who belong to religious minorities rose from approximately 1 in 5, or 19%, to 1 in 4, 25%, including growing shares of Muslims, which doubled from 5% to 10%, and Hindus, which more than doubled from 3% to 7%, all in the same period. In other words, this research confirms that in the U.S., Americans are rubbing shoulders with an increasingly wider spectrum of diversity when it comes to religious viewpoints, practices, and traditions. Besides immigration policy and practice, other clashes of religious values and viewpoints exist in the U.S. For example, a 2016 Pew Center study reported that 2/3 of Americans want employers to provide birth control and insurance plans, while 3/10 argue they should not, for religious reasons. Why, many citizens wonder, should they have to pay for birth control for others, when their own faith prohibits them from using it for themselves? On the other hand, those who want their contraceptives covered by health insurance argue that religious conservatives are overstepping their bounds in the application of their First Amendment rights. The same report indicates U.S. citizens are split for religious reasons over the issue of the public's right to withhold wedding-related services from same-sex couples, along with concerns related to the use of public bathrooms by transgender people. To discover whether it's possible to live peacefully and confidently together as religiously diverse citizens in the U.S. and as citizens of an even more religiously diverse world, one must turn to the foundational principles of religious freedom embedded in U.S. history and the nation's Bill of Rights. Then and only then will we be able to sort out such questions and appropriate responses in ways that will not infringe upon someone's basic human rights, including our own. In the next video, we'll go back, way back, to before the beginning of the USA, to the British colonies in North America that eventually gave birth to the U.S. We'll go back long enough to refamiliarize ourselves with the nature of the religious freedom upon which the people of the U.S. and its government stand. I'm Professor Wendy. Thanks for watching. Please take a moment to leave some feedback, ask questions, and click to subscribe to Cool Seminary Tutorials. Most of all, have fun learning.